Hey everyone, thanks for joining the monthly Fire Safe Sonoma speaker series. My name's Roberta McIntyre and I'm the president and CEO of Fire Safe Sonoma. We live stream this program on the fourth Thursday of every month except for the month of December and on the third Thursday of November. Guess why? Because it's Thanksgiving. Good to see you guys all here. Um, and you can find our past speaker series programs on our YouTube channel. There's a lot of great information there. I think we've been doing this for like 3 or 4 years now. So we're in, I think, our 4th season. It started out as what we called the Fire Alliance, and then it evolved to our what we now call our speaker series. For those folks who might not know, Fire Safe Sonoma is Sonoma County, the county-wide Fire Safe Council serving all of Sonoma County, and we've been doing that for 26 years now. We're in our 26th year. Yep, that's right. We've been working in this space before wildland fire safety and risk reduction was popular. Before we get started, I want to thank Team Fire Safe Sonoma today for helping out. With us today is Emily Tuga. She's our county coordinator assigned to projects and programs. Also, we have Erika Ramsden, who is our county coordinator assigned to Firewise communities and general outreach. And Rebecca Fisher, she was a past fellow who is now on our staff, and her role is program assistant. And basically, she does everything else she does everything that Roberta Cantor won't do. Also helping with us today are 4 current California Climate Action Corps fellows: Aidan DeYoung, Alina Brammer, Malia Zimmerman, and Julie Edwards. They're all helping out behind the scenes to make this work. And as the host, I'm not in tune with everything. So if we reach more than 25 attendees, please let me know now. Are we there yet?
We are there.
All right, so because we have more than 25 folks, including our staff, what I am going to do is do this giveaway. So we've got this book right here. It's called Inflamed. It was co-authored by my former journalism instructor at the Santa Rosa Junior College. And apparently, I was the inspiration for her writing this book. I didn't know that till she signed it. And she wrote, Roberta, this book would not have happened without you. Yeah, I was in the journalism program during the Tubbs fire, and we covered a lot of that. Even while the junior college was shut down, the journalism team, we did a lot of coverage of the fire and all that stuff going on there. And then some of the things that were learned from that fire inspired her to write the book Inflamed with her co-author, Paul Gillipson, Gillickson, I can't pronounce it, I'm bad at names, from the Press Democrat. So what I'll do is after this is over, within a few days, I will look at the list of attendees and I will put their email addresses into an Excel spreadsheet and do a random selection in Excel and have Excel pick one of those email addresses to win that prize, which will be that book. And then what I will do is reach out to you via email through that email and say, hey, you won our door prize for our speaker series. Just send me your mailing address and I will email this to you or ship this to you via Amazon probably. I won't do it on the 28th though, and people that know what I'm talking about know what I mean. Okay, of course, another update, we have Fire Safe Sonoma's regular board meeting on March 21st at 4th at 3:30 p.m. Sign up through our website. The Sonoma Resource Conservation District is hosting a post-fire considerations online workshop focused on providing landowner and land managers impacted by wildfire as an opportunity to learn about land management considerations a few years after the fire. This online event will be held on March 1st from 9 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. I think you can find that on our public calendar. All this should be available on our public calendar on our website. Also, Pepperwood Preserve is hosting ongoing learning and burning days, which will be held on March 6th, March 8th, and March 20th next month, giving local community members the opportunity to learn about how to use fire as a stewardship tool. And to stay in the loop, subscribe to our updates. So with that, our last speaker series was held in January, where we heard from our very own California Climate Action Corps fellows, Aiden, Alina, Malia, and Julie. Together, they explained the connection between California wildfires and climate change and how you can cope with the weight of these issues. They also shared actionable steps to help build resilience, enhance preparedness, and foster a sense of community and hope. This presentation is on our YouTube channel, so you can go check it out after watching today's speaker series. Now this month, we're pleased to be joined by local burn experts, Erika Lutz and Devyn Friedfel, who will discuss the fundamentals of prescribed burns and their role in fire management and ecosystem health. Erika Lutz is an artist, educator, and storyteller dedicated to fire's role in shaping our landscapes and communities. At Audubon Canyon Ranch, Erika cultivates social resilience by sharing meaningful information and restorative experiences as Fire Forward's prescribed fire information coordinator and prescribed reporter for watch duty. Erika is a founding member of Forestville Fire Safe Council, collectively Holiday Canyon Terrace, leading communication strategy and community outreach. Devyn was born and raised in the Russian River area, where he grew up learning to love the beauty and diversity of Sonoma County through the Santa Rosa Junior College. He had an opportunity to visit Pepperwood and dreamt of someday working there. Devyn transferred to UC Santa Cruz to finish his bachelor's degree, then worked up and down the Central Coast with the UC Natural Reserve System, while simultaneously working as a field biologist for 2 environmental consulting firms. Devyn has achieved his dream job and is now Pepperwood's fire and stewardship manager and has been with Pepperwood for the last 8 years. So I will leave it at that. Their biographies are very long and I don't want to consume all of our time. I will let their talent speak for itself. So with that, let's welcome Erika and Devyn, and I am going to go dark while they give us this wonderful set of information. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Unmute myself. Hi, everybody. My name is Devyn, and I'm going to be joined by Erika, and we're going to be talking to you today about intentional fire and how, why, and all different aspects of its use in Sonoma County. Next slide. So just a little about what we're going to cover. We're just going to kind of introduce ourselves a little bit and our organizations, kind of why intentional fire is being used, how it's being used in Sonoma County, and then a little bit about embracing fire and how we're using fire to kind of build capacity in the North Bay, the fire practitioners in Sonoma County. So who are the people that are using it? And then a little bit, hopefully we inspire some folks and show some ways that we can get involved in all different aspects. And I think hopefully we can emphasize the diversity of our community and that really so many skill sets are needed and can be useful in our prescribed fire community. And we'll follow up at the end with a Q&A. Next slide. So Pepperwood Preserve is a 3,200 acre nature preserve that sits in the traditional homeland of the Wapo people. We are in the Mayakama mountain range, and it's like roughly in the northeast corner of Santa Rosa. So what our objectives are really for studying the land, but also integrating land stewardship activities with that. And that really is a diversity of land stewardship activities, whether it be forest stewardship, grassland stewardship with grazing, mowing, prescribed fire, fuels reduction work, invasive plant removal, native plant propagation, erosion control, and many other things. But then we pair that with our research. So we're able to monitor and study kind of some of the impacts of our stewardship activities and learn from those kind of outcomes, whether we're getting the outcomes we desire, or if we need to make adjustments. And then education is a big piece of what we do at Pepperwood as well. So presenting to folks on webinars, writing reports. We also have a large education team that works with groups of students from our area, and we offer adult education classes so that we can kind of share out some of this information we're learning as we're actively engaging with our land. We also have a Native Advisory Council that we work with regularly to kind of help guide our stewardship activities, really with the idea that these are the original stewards of the land, and they know best. So working with them to figure out how to support their goals, but also hopefully to learn some stewardship practices that have historically been on our landscape for thousands of years. Next slide.
Hello, y'all. Audubon Canyon Ranch is a nonprofit conservation and education organization, and we are dedicated to connecting nature, people, and science for a more resilient world. We have 50 staff members as an investment to local land stewards, conservation scientists, and educators. And we started with birds. That's what you're seeing in this logo. We were founded in 1962 to save a major heronry and block commercial development in the Bolinas Lagoon on a preserve that is now called Martin Griffin Preserve. And today we collaboratively steward 5,000 acres in a system of nature preserves located within ancestral territories of Coast Miwok, Southern Pomo, and Wapo peoples. And we use our preserves as hubs for training and research that supports the work we do throughout the greater North Bay area. But fire changed things. This video that you see is a prescribed burn that we conducted at Bouverie Preserve in May 2017, just 5 months before the Nuns fire swept through. And it burned about 75% of the wildlands and destroyed most of our buildings and infrastructure. And although that was a high severity wildfire, we also saw strong evidence of the ecological resilience and fire adaptation within the scar. And we saw what recovery looked like in the wildfire scar compared to the prescribed burn area where fire was used intentionally. So this fueled our motivation to dramatically change the way that we were working with fire. And we launched our Fire Forward program in 2017 to advance North Bay's capacity to use good fire. Good fire is any fire that rejuvenates and restores the landscape and reconnects people with the land. And prescribed fire is intentional fire that benefits health and diversity, reduces risk, and builds ecosystem resilience against climate-driven wildfire events. I work as our prescribed fire information coordinator on the Fire Forward team, and this is a new position, not just for our organization, but for the region. And living in Forestville, being here in Sonoma County, I've become intimately aware of the impact of too much fire on the land and people and our sense of home and place. I'm madly in love with this place where I live, and I've also been evacuated more times than I ever expected and seen the impact of too much. And I've also seen what it can do for people who are working with it intentionally and what that does for communities. So you could say that fire inspired a change in me too. Fire runs deep in its ability to transform.
So why are we using fire? I am kind of, put it in simplest terms, really fire is a management tool or stewardship tool that is cost effective and ecologically sound. And we're able to scale up and utilize it with relatively low cost and low risk when done appropriately and taking the due diligence to do it appropriately. Next slide. So I think it's really important for us when understanding intentional fire, prescribed fire, cultural fires to look back at the history of California and understand a little bit about the history of fire in California and really in our coast ranges and what that kind of history has brought us to and where we are today. So California has a long history of fire in it. And we can look at and a lot of researchers have looked at soil samples to find charcoal to kind of help trace back frequencies of fires, looking at tree rings, and then most importantly, really communicating with indigenous communities, getting those oral histories and understanding that the use of fire has been very predominant for thousands of years in California. So we can also look at the fire return intervals, so how frequent fire has returned to that area through those kind of bits of knowledge. And then we can understand that most of those fires were actually human set, because we can think about the other ways that fires have been started, and it's lightning strikes. It's really humans and lightning strikes. And we know that the frequency of lightning strikes do not match with the fire return intervals in these areas. Also, indigenous communities are continually and have continually been expressing the use of fire as an ecological stewardship tool. We also can look back at some of the early settlers that came to California and the way they describe it. It's often mentioned the smoke in the air, looking at Spanish records and looking at other European colonizers moving through in those original records frequently describe smoky atmospheres. So in grasslands, we have a fire return interval of roughly about 1 to 5 years. There's obviously outliers, but most grasslands were being burnt once every year to every 5 years. Oak woodlands are about a 7 to 15 year fire return interval. And then chaparral is a little bit larger in the 20 to like 30, 35 year fire return interval. And we can really see, and I'm going to just kind of speak to my experience being at Pepperwood, seeing prescribed fires and seeing wildfires, and watching the ecological recovery of our landscape. So seeing our grasslands become prolific with wildflowers after the first time they've been burnt in 50 years. Some of the best wildflower blooms I've ever seen in my life, especially in Sonoma County, and they came directly after the years that they had been burnt. We've also seen areas that have been mostly oak woodlands kind of have a really wonderful recovery, and we've seen those trees be extremely resistant. We've seen our chaparral and the chaparral species resprout prolifically and have a really wonderful recovery, while kind of having those fires also knock back some encroaching Douglas fir species and some non-native species as well. So I think it's really important to watch the landscape and its recovery from fire, and to know that these plants and the animals really know how to respond to fire. And they have evolved with fire for so many generations that it's just inherent for them to kind of have this really wonderful response to especially low intensity fires. Some of the wildfires that have burnt really hot, which is not the historic way they have burnt, we've seen some adverse effects on that. But when we're speaking about low intensity fires, we can see the plants, the animals' recovery be very almost healthier sometimes post fire. Next slide. So community safety, right? This is a snippet from CAL FIRE's webpage about the wildfires we've had in the Lake, Napa, and Sonoma areas just from 2015 to 2020, which was really an intense time in our communities where we experienced a lot of wildfires. And a lot of that had been due because of the lack of fire and the lack of, and the accumulation of fuel that has happened with that lack of fire. And so if we think of low intensity fires for woodlands, for example, those low intensity fires in a 7-15 year fire return interval reduces those fuels slowly over time. But if you don't have that fire and you break that continuity of continuous low intensity fires, the fuel loading builds up, and when a wildfire comes, it burns really hot. And I intentionally say when a wildfire comes, because we will burn, whether it's on our terms or whether it's on the nature's terms or things that are out of human control. So the little square box there is where Pepperwood is. Next slide. So this is just a little zoom in just to kind of give folks context if you weren't aware. We burnt both in 2017. and then again in 2019. And that orange area is the areas that were burnt both in 2017 and 2019. So at Pepperwood, we got very familiar with wildfire recovery, watching nature recover, dealing with some of those impacts to our infrastructure, to our community. My father and his wife lived in Coffey Park and lost their home. All of my work has been burnt. So these wildfires had a huge impact on me personally. And really, I see using fire as the approach to really protect our communities and work together to kind of build a more resilient landscape. Next slide. So during the Kincaid fire, CAL FIRE was actually able to make a stand to stop the southern progression of the Kincaid fire from basically moving down and doing really similar to what the Tubbs fire did, dropping into that Mark West corridor. So, you know, I think CAL FIRE points to Pepperwood and says, we're able to make a stand here because of a lot of the fuels management work we do, and because we're constantly communicating with CAL FIRE and use them as a really big partner in getting our fuels management work done, and also making Pepperwood a place where they can make stands to protect our communities. We're kind of in the middle of a ridge between our Napa communities and our Santa Rosa, Sonoma County communities. We have grasslands along our ridges, and we work closely with CAL FIRE to help support our fuels management and work with them to think about ways where our fuels reduction work and our prescribed fire work can actually benefit them and other emergency responders to kind of make stands during these wildfire events. Next slide. So through our vegetation management program, we work closely with CAL FIRE to implement a lot of our prescribed burns. So this is a great example of some CAL FIRE folks working on prescribed fire. It's a good opportunity for them to get training, hands-on experience before wildfire season comes, or kind of at the end, getting them familiar with our landscape so if they do need to come back to Pepperwood during a wildfire situation, but also really just reducing those fuels. And you can see they're out there protecting ecological resources, spraying down those redwood trees to make sure that they don't burn too hot if the fire intensity is getting a little bit hot. So we're actually able to control the heat and intensity on the fire with a number of different techniques when lighting. And so just thinking of our CAL FIRE partners and our other local fire departments and how they're really critical to this work being done, but I like to think we're also critical in supporting their work, and it kind of is an ongoing relationship. Next slide. So a little bit more about teaching opportunities, not just for our firefighter professionals, but also for our community members to get involved. That top left picture is a picture of Mike Winter, who is one of Pepperwood's longtime volunteers and landowners, and has been really engaged and kind of starting to engage more in prescribed fire work. And then we have 3 young fire practitioners on the right-hand side going ahead and kind of teaching Mike a little bit about a drip torch and how to use it. And I think that look on his face is just the awe of the knowledge that our young fire practitioners have. And so I love that picture because it's a really juxtaposition, the young teaching the old, but really just showing that we all have something to teach each other, especially in this kind of fire community, because everyone brings some pretty valuable stuff to the table. The next picture is Marty, who's been with the Audubon Canyon Ranch team and I've experienced his growth in this, and he is now a professional fire practitioner and probably has a long career ahead of him. So much more technical. He's become a very proficient sawyer, dropping hazard trees when needed. So there is the early, I'm just learning about prescribed fire, to the Marty level where he is now a very highly skilled fire practitioner and has a long career ahead of him. On the top right, it's some ranchers kind of just learning a little bit at Pepperwood about how they can use fire in their rangelands to reduce invasive species, improve forage for cattle. So thinking about it from also an agricultural perspective and how fire can be used that way. In the bottom right the bottom left is some folks from North Bay Jobs for Justice, really getting some training, some hands-on experience using fire, finding different pathways for career options. The lower middle picture is at one of our Learn and Burn days. So just a bunch of different community members from all walks of life, all coming together, having a great time, getting their hands dirty, and learning about fire and how to use that at scale. So hopefully they can take those opportunities and bring them with them as we spread the knowledge of fire. And then lastly, on the bottom right is a SRJC ecology class coming out. They did a little burning with me, and really about the context is fire ecology. So I think there's a place for everybody in this prescribed fire world to not only learn, but also teach others about it. I think fire is something that has historically brought people together, whether it be around a campfire or whether it be around a cooking stove. People have inherently been drawn together because of fire or around fire and how it's benefited us. Next slide. Restoration opportunities. So fire provides a really wonderful restoration opportunity. The folks on the right there is somebody from Sonoma RCD and somebody from our local NRCS department that are helping restore a pile burn that was planted, that was placed on top of invasive species to intentionally kill those invasive species. And then we can then return some native perennial grasses to that area. So not only reducing the fuels, but also removing invasive plants, providing an opportunity for native plants to come back. Those native plants are much more fire resistant and not going to spread fire as much. So fuels reduction, positive ecological value, and then also making our landscape more fire resilient as well for those future wildfires. The bottom left-hand picture is a picture post-prescribed burn that we did, and you can really see most of those plants that are left are native plants that have responded really positively to the fire. So we're going ahead and doing a little invasive plant removal post because the fire removed a lot of it for us. And then we're helping kind of restore some native plants in there through seeding and plantings. And then just inherently with timing of fire, you can really target thatch reduction, invasive plants, and use the fire in the way to kind of hopefully highlight some of the species that you want. So that is a picture post-fire of some of our, I think, blue-eyed gillies coming up naturally. We didn't seed that, we didn't plant those. Those were in the seed banks, but they're were so much more prolific after the fire. We'd seen, you know, a handful of them before, and then we get these big blooms after the fire. So it's been really exciting to see these ecological shifts, and it also opens these doors for us to kind of get in and support some more native plant stewardship. Next slide. Monitoring, really important, like I mentioned before. So Pepperwood has a number of wildlife cameras where we're looking at areas in the wildlife coming through areas after we burn them. That's about 6 months after a prescribed fire, where we're seeing those two big bucks kind of move through that area. The bottom left is a picture of one of our restoration techs doing some native seed propagation so that we can then go out and support it. But you can really see areas that we're treating with fire. It doesn't do a great job, but that grass, those grasses in the front is purple needlegrass, which is our California state grass, and have so many wonderful ecological benefits. I don't have time to get into it. And then on the right is our annual grassland monitoring. Some of our research staff are annually going out, monitoring our grasslands, monitoring our forests, monitoring our wildlife to really make sure that these prescribed fires are actually they are benefiting the ecology, and we're seeing that through our data. But we're also seeing it just observationally. And our Native Advisory Council is going, yep, we told you. Next slide. So this is just an example of some of the, on the right-hand side, it's a bunch of our monitoring and research plots we have at Pepperwood, and the left-hand side is some of the prescribed fires we've done or proposed prescribed fires we're planning on doing. And you can see where the overlap is. But one really interesting thing that I always like to highlight is we're doing a water balance study. So looking at the water in an ecosystem, and we find it in the soil, we find it in the streams, we find it in the plants, and we find it in the atmosphere. So those are the 4 places we're monitoring where water is. And the idea is if we go in and bring prescribed fire back, that it actually might increase the water holding capacity of our area. So when we burn, we release charcoal and carbon. That getting mixed in the soil increases the water holding capacity of the soil, but we're also reducing the stem count of trees and shrubs to closer to the historic levels. We know through a lot of observations and data that our forests are overstocked. And so if we can use prescribed fire to actually balance our forests to be closer to those historic levels where we can promote larger old growth trees, not a bunch of small trees. Those trees are more fire resilient. But what that means for the water is less trees are sucking up water. So we're actually sucking less water up from the soil, meaning we have more moisture in our soil for later in the summer, meaning more water is trickling into our streams later for our downstream salmonid habitats, but also more water is available for our plants, meaning that our plants can continue to have a higher live fuel moisture later in the summer. And live fuel moisture is a really critical metric when looking at wildfire potential. So if we can keep our living trees wetter for longer into the summer, we're reducing the risk of wildfire. It's a little bit complicated, but it's really just kind of highlight this relationship that fire doesn't have. It's not just with our plants, our animals, our people, but with all our water system, our air systems. And really, we have to be thinking about fire in terms of our ecology and our systems in California, or things kind of get out of whack and don't really make sense. And so we're hopefully trying to highlight this through some of the research we're doing here at Pepperwood. Next slide. Also, we're really working to support cultural burning practices by communicating with our Native American communities, especially here at Pepperwood. We have our Native Advisory Council, and trying to support their goals through cultural fire practices, or maybe supporting individual species that are of interest. And really, I think this is important to continue to communicate with our Indigenous communities, because they have been doing these intentional fire practices since time immemorial. And they have a deep, intimate relationship with fire and understanding the timing, the dynamics of fire, when's appropriate, what's the most appropriate way to put it down to provide a healthy landscape. California, Sonoma County is a biological hotspot globally, and that is because of Indigenous communities and their stewardship practices, fire being a large part of that. And so when Western folks came to California and said, it looks like a beautiful parkland, it was a stewarded piece of land that was frequently lit on fire with low intensity fires to benefit the ecology. With these practices, there's a number of studies kind of happening throughout California, but with working with Indigenous communities to support cultural practices, we see vegetation shifts towards our native species. Those native species are more fire resilient. So by using fire, we're creating, in these original cultural ways, we're creating a negative feedback loop. So the more fire we put on the ground, the less likely it is for those areas to burn again. That's because of fuels reduction, but it's also because of the shift towards these more fire resilient species, and getting our larger, healthier trees that are more fire resilient. Next slide.
On that note, I wanted to share this quote from Leif Hillman from the Karuk tribe up north, that fire has always been here. It's always been a part of us. How can we engage with fire? How can we embrace fire as a partner? And so as fire practitioners, we're releasing this metaphor of being at war with fire. We're seeking to change that paradigm to respect fire, respect the place that we live, respect the practices that have been used by Indigenous people for millennia, and respecting the non-human beings that we share a home with and the elements that they need to survive. This landscape of our work is constantly evolving because the world is changing very quickly. And the future depends on us working with the elements that offer us the best chance of survival. And this thing that's happening, that we're all seeing, that we're all living through, is demanding that we listen to the land and that we learn from each other. That means investing in each other and the relationships that are going to allow us to learn together and adapt our ways of living and caring for the earth and each other, and to use this force of nature that's screaming to be heard. And it helps me to remember that we are also a force of nature. And one of my favorite places to see this coming to life is in PBAs, which is a prescribed burn association. PBAs are community-based mutual aid networks of locals who come together to learn, practice, and grow their stewardship skills using prescribed fire. And ours is called the Good Fire Alliance, the GFA, which serves the greater North Bay area. And the GFA is one of California's largest and most active prescribed burn associations, with nearly 1,000 members, and at least 500 are Fireline certified. And after this weekend, at least another 100 more will have completed their annual refresher and be recertified and ready for the coming year. Our backgrounds are from all over. We're rich from everyone from land stewards to conservation scientists, from artists to baristas, agency firefighters, and wildland fire lighters. And this picture feels really important to share. This is from the Wallbridge fire in 2020, where the fire community really came together to support a moment of crisis for not just Sonoma County, but most of California. No SoCo Fire contracted all these trained fire practitioners that you see through Audubon Canyon Ranch, and that moment launched the first formal partnership between fire agencies and the prescribed fire community. And really developed this commitment to professional skills and cooperative operations. It became a shared priority across the board, and it did wonders to ignite cohesion in the Good Fire Alliance community. And that cohesion made way for cooperative burns. And what that means is collaboratively conducted operations with multiple stakeholders, landowners, community members, government agencies, environmental organizations, fire management professionals. And it's using the shared cache of resources like hoses and tools and equipment. And they benefit from people with a wide range of experiences too, certifications, the ability to staff the operation. We've learned through this work that no one can do this work alone. And so the story of cooperative burns and intentional fire, especially in Redwood, continues. We just kicked off the new year with our first burn of 2025 with the Good Fire Alliance at Martin Griffin Preserve, using intentional fire to increase diversity and protect redwood stands from future wildfires. And this was a cooperative burn with all these beautiful people that you see that came from all over Northern California. You're seeing our own staff, North Bay Jobs with Justice, Resilience Works, Tribal Eco Restoration Alliance, Hayfork Watershed Research and Training Center, Stinson Beach Fire Protection District, and this does not even account for the people who had to leave to go pick up their prescription for the sheep that was sick, that had to go pick up their kid from work. There's so many people who come out to these works and they all have a role. So back to developing professional capacity. Without the generosity of the GFA volunteers, our capacity to do these burns would be super reduced. And we also know that volunteering means that participants have to pay for training and dedicate weekends and time off. And it can take years to become proficient, leaving behind a lot of people who want to participate, but they can't afford to pay for it or volunteer their time. So we shifted to a both and. We both need the volunteer workforce and we need a professional workforce. And so with the support of a CAL FIRE grant, we now have 18 people working full-time on the Fire Forward team, You'll see them all in the upper left-hand corner. We've got a 12-person prescribed fire module. And then we also have this team of people you see in the lower right-hand corner who are working to support them. We've got fire ecologists, training specialists, program developers, communicators, and we're working to develop this new model of workforce development in the field of prescribed fire that is desperately needed. And I'm not a fan of sharing graphs, but this one feels pretty important because we need to develop regional capacity, and we can only do that with training and resource sharing and people. So you can see in this graph right here, our strategy came to fruition when we started investing more time into training and supporting partners than just implementing our own burns. We're building this regional capacity to work through strong partnerships, strong collaborations, and resource sharing. Pleased to share last year, we cooperatively burned 1,000 acres in North Bay. That's a number that's doubled since 2020. And this is what happens when we share access to land, people, equipment, training practices, and knowledge. And we're creating networks around shared purpose of creating resilient communities, healthier ecosystems, effective fuels management, as another way of investing in people. And our fellowship program is how we train the future trainers. We launched this in 2021 as an investment in the professional development of all these people that you see, plus a lot more that you do not see on this screen. And this program supports these fellows in becoming California state certified burn bosses that enable them and their organizations to plan and coordinate prescribed burns with access to the California Liability Claims Fund. And it creates a structure for collaborative peer relationships to develop on and off the fire line, so everyone is supporting each other's learning and supporting each other's burns. And each of these fellows now has the ability to lead burns within their organizations and feed that mentorship back into the community. For reference, there's 45 registered burn bosses in the entire state of California. 10 of them were trained through our program, and they are right here in North Bay. Devyn was our very first fellow to earn that certification. It was really inspiring to watch that happen. And within the last year, there were 9 more that popped out. So there's 10 already. We've got 3 more on the way in the next few months coming from state parks, regional parks, Monansville, School for Inclement Weather. And then we've got more on the way from Tribal Eco Restoration Alliance, North Bay Jobs with Justice, Land Pass. The list goes on. It's very exciting. I gush easily. I'm going to stop myself right there. And we're also burning. We plan and implement prescribed fire. We're working directly with landowners and managers to help them develop burn plans, gather resources, and prepare the land for fire. And then from there, we coordinate with the Good Fire Alliance to bring the people power, the training, and the safety, because we aren't meant to do this work alone. We also know that fire can be a super complex social issue that can elicit a range of responses and can easily activate fear and control and these ideas about rescuing and who needs to be rescued. And so this feeling of loss connected to fire and sense of home runs deep for a lot of people. And we see the need to support more community organizers in talking about their experience with prescribed fire to create more relational and localized hubs amongst neighbors. So much has changed in the last 7 years. We're all developing new habits of where to get reliable and trustworthy information about fire. And Watch Duty has been a game changer. This is another Sonoma County nonprofit that was born out of those firestorms. We began collaborating with them last year on their prescribed fire feature. That icon in the lower right corner is the prescribed fire icon. And getting burn bosses set up as prescribed fire reporters, having information about what kind of fire is happening around you, both unplanned wildfires and planned prescribed fires, helps you know how to respond to it. And we're focusing on stronger outreach and storytelling around fire and smoke. We are creating our own. We are collaborating with social scientists, PIOs, filmmakers, journalists, Firewise and Fire Safe Councils, community members, and so many other people to infuse the community with different ways to connect to this work. Because learning to work with fire is just as much for ecological health as it is mental, emotional, and social health. Research and monitoring. With every burn, we are learning to improve our burn plans and our smoke management plans, two major elements in every prescription. Studying, planning, and implementing fire is just as much science as it is an art, and one that we are evolving as we increase our use of intentional fire. This video is showing the relationship between the marine layer, and in a moment you'll see a clean smoke column that is coming up. This is from a 14.5 acre prescribed burn on coastal prairie in Nicasio on the reservoir. And our friends at NOAA turned us on to using these cameras to fine tune our understanding of the relationship between weather variables and fire, and improve our understanding of smoke behavior to improve our smoke management plans. I wish I could show you this whole video. It makes me super happy. We'll go on. I think this is you, Devyn.
Awesome. Thank you, Erika. So really, we talked about the why, the how, the community, but who's actually using fire in our county? And first and foremost, indigenous communities. They've continued to use fire for thousands and thousands of years, and hopefully this resurgence of kind of prescribed fire really making the mainstream is presenting the opportunity for them to get support from outside organizations, and also just highlight the work that has continued to happen, and hopefully able to kind of expand into their traditional reaches where they have stewarded the land with fire. CAL FIRE is obviously our large fire agency in the state, but they're very active in prescribed fire and probably account for the large majority of prescribed fires across the state, and are a critical partner to our PBA in terms of supporting us, coming out and checking, providing permits and guidance on how to do this, but also supporting us through the resources along with their knowledge. Our local fire agencies, Northern Sonoma County Fire, Sonoma County Fire District, Sonoma Valley Fire, Santa Rosa Fire. I'm probably forgetting a few of them, but they're all really actively engaging in prescribed burns, putting them on them themselves, but also coming and supporting our PBA, the Good Fire Alliance, and really working with other agencies. And kind of, we're really starting to see this really awesome cross collaboration. I think one prescribed fire I hosted at Pepperwood had like 13 different agencies or organizations represented, and that's really a big feat, especially for these big agencies like fire districts and CAL FIRE to kind of get involved. So we're really grateful for their support, and hopefully it goes likewise, and we can continue to support them. The Good Fire Alliance, or PBA, is actively burning. We're teaching classes and opportunities to get people engaged with fire, and supporting their use of fire across the community. Regional Parks has their own fire district. California State Parks has their own fire and prescribed fire team. Nonprofit agencies such as Pepperwood, Audubon Canyon Ranch, Land Paths Laguna Foundation, Sonoma Land Trust, a number of other agencies as well. I'm not going to be able to name them all. Land Trust, as I mentioned, our RCDs, Resource Conservation District. We're super fortunate to have very supportive RCDs. We have two in our county. Sonoma RCD and Gold Ridge RCD are both actively engaged in our prescribed fire and helping landowners get the resources they need. County agencies, ag and open spaces using prescribed fire on their lands, and thinking of reintroducing fire on some of their lands that they oversee. Just landowners and land managers that are actively on the land have been using prescribed fire and continue to use prescribed fire in our county. And then UC Cooperative Extension, have some really awesome staff members that work in our county that are providing resources and support and classes on the use of fire and how to steward our land better. And really, there's probably other groups. I try to make as comprehensive of a list as I could to really just highlight how many different groups of people are using fire, and they're really kind of using it in different ways. But we're starting to see all of these different partners interact and engage and overlap on each other's burns. So it's really this collaborative effort, and we hope to continue to see this collaboration. Next slide.
Oh my gosh, there's so many people to name. Fire Forward and Pepperwood are definitely not the only ones that are doing this work or teaching people to do this work or engaging them. There's so many different ways to get involved, opportunities. Devyn mentioned a couple from the Good Fire Alliance. If you go to their website, which we will link in the chat, that's a great source to find out all the things that are happening, from the pile burn workshops to community events, posty fire ecology walks. Pepperwood's got a ton of training and workshops that are happening throughout the year that help with forest and grassland stewardship, hosting those field trips you saw, and the Learn and Burn days are super exciting. Fire Forward has NWCG certified trainings that we do throughout the year, including the one happening this weekend to get everyone recertified as firefighter type 2. We have the Fireline trainings on prescribed burns, workshop series. Land Paths has got an incredible new program with community patch burns and a queer forestry and fire program. Tribal Eco Restoration Alliance up north, they go by Terra, have ecocultural fire trainings, attracts a Native Stewards Fellowship where they're accepting applications right now. And there's also a ton of filmmaker, artist, and author talks happening. We have Sashua Burrows, who produced The Fire Poppy. The Fire and Music Project just came out with a walk at Fire's Edge. Ian Nelson with Pepperwood Rising. And then we have so many incredible authors who are also writing and engaging people too. We've got Danny Burleson, who's got a book coming out called Red Flag Warning about mutual aid, land stewardship, and community care in fire country. Manjula Martin, who wrote The Last Fire Season, which is a national bestseller that came out of Occidental, on living with fire when it's fire season year round. There's just so many. I can't say enough. I'm happy to gush more if you wish to talk to us, but we've only got a little bit of time left. So with that, I'll say the world of intentional fire is not new, but this is a new era of how we hold good fire in this community. And there's so much to learn and share. This is really just the basic lay of the land. Thank you so much for being here and for listening, and to Fire Safe Sonoma for inviting us to join you all. Devyn and I would love to hear from you. Here's our contact. And the QR codes have goodies from both of us. And we will shift now to Roberta. Thank you so much.
Yeah, very good. Thank you guys for the fantastic presentation. Very thought-provoking. We do have a handful of Q&As. We are getting short on time, so folks have to leave. You're reminded that we are recording this. And if you do have to leave right at 3 o'clock, you can come back and watch the recording afterwards. But if your question did get in the chat and you have to leave, we will probably stay long enough to get to all the questions. So I have a few comments I want to start off with. And one of the things that I've come to learn recently and agree with, that to reduce community residents' anxiety over putting fire on the ground, I'm imagining starting with, some pile burns first to get communities comfortable with that concept of burning. Was probably a good idea before you go into prescribe or to broadcast burning. Under the heading of prescribed burning, there's two fundamental types. There's broadcast burning and pile burning. And pile burning is very controlled, very, it's like having a handful of campfires. Do you guys want to speak to that at all, or does that make sense?
Yeah, I'd say those are kind of the biggest categories. Like, you can kind of break it down. There's other like small patch burning, I think, is like a third category. But yeah, I would 100% agree that pile burning is a great way to start, just in terms of like safety and concern, also ease of permits. I think it's a great opportunity to build a relationship with your local fire department as well. It's something they're probably going to be more comfortable with. And I'm always going to be advocating for, if you're going to be burning on your land, make sure your local fire department or fire agency is engaged and involved. They come out, they're going to be supportive of you. We have awesome leadership in this county, and firefighters in this county. And so they're going to be an ally, and the more communication you have and the more relations you have with that local fire department, I think is just going to build everybody's success.
Yeah, Marika, one of our team, she had Gold Ridge Fire out of her place to help her with some pile burns recently. And that went pretty well, I believe. And then the other thing I think you guys hit on that I want to kind of reinforce is that growing a lot of teams to be able to do this work is key, because the window of opportunity to actually do this safely is seasonally, can be quite small. You know, you have these little windows of opportunity where the weather looks like it's going to be good, the fuel moisture is good, you know, there looks like there's not going to be a lot of wind, and it's a lot safer to put fire on the ground or to do those burns. So, you know, the more people we can get involved and engaged in this activity, I think the better we're all going to be overall. A lot of work in a very short period of time, or in little spots of opportunity. Is that fair to say? Would you guys agree? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, taking advantage of that window of opportunity is hugely important. And there's just so much land in Sonoma County. We're a really big county, and a lot of remote areas. So we just need more people.
Yeah. Okay.
Engaged.
So we'll point them to you guys to learn, to be experts. Marla Foreman shared that she's a newish homeowner in Forestville, and she's actively fire hardening their home. They're interested in becoming stewards, experts in hardening. She's wondering if there's any opportunities for formal training for hardening experts to be hired throughout the community and specifically her neighborhood. And when she says hardening, I imagine that's specific to something you guys mentioned and different from structural hardening. Do you guys? Or
Yeah, if I heard that question, I would say talk to our friends at Fire Safe Sonoma to learn about structural hardening.
yeah, we can do that if that's what she means. Yeah.
I would also say, like a little bit beyond structural hardening and like moving more to like the land stewardship piece, is that the UC Cooperative Extension, they offer a forest stewardship series. I'm forgetting what it's called. I think it's like a forest work, and it's on the UC Cooperative Extension website, and they're offering it right now. But it's like a certified, and you help write forest stewardship plan and really kind of think about all the aspects of kind of stewardship. So that's like a pretty accessible resource. I think most of those courses are online, and you maybe have one or two field trips, but it's taught by our
And I may have misrepresented the exact wording she used, but the way she said it was she's interested in actively fire hardening their homestead. So in that term, I would imagine it's more than just the structure itself. It's, you know, all the way out, you know, beyond the defensible space zones even probably. So, but yeah, pile burning, you know, prescribed burning could help with all that.
Yeah, and then the Good Fire Alliance, which I think I saw Aiden put it in, has a number of those workshops that Erika and I mentioned, and that's kind of the hub where all these different organizations, so you don't have to look at all our websites. You can go to that prescribed California PBA/Good Fire Alliance, and that should have a list of, and there's a lot of other workshops, and so we're trying our best to kind of make that the hub for a lot of the kind of trainings and stuff. And then in terms of home hardening and defensible space, we totally looked at Fire Safe Sonoma as the experts. So
Thank you. Lynn wanted to touch base on one of Erika's slides regarding community safety. She asked, it looks like there was a fair amount of brush and small firs on the ground. How much clearing is really needed? How much brush and wood is too much fuel on the ground if you want to do a prescribed burn? Gotta go to the training.
so do you want that, Erika?
I'm trying to remember which slide that came up on, but I think actually you're a better person to answer that, Devyn.
The reason I'm laughing is because it's like a common,
Yeah.
I'm going to give you the common answer that you get in land stewardship is it depends.
Yeah.
And it's kind of comical, but it really depends on a lot of factors. What's your weather? How big's your unit? What's the containment line look like? How comfortable are you with hotness? What kind of resources do you have on site?
Fuel, moisture, everything.
Fuel
Yeah.
moisture, are there sensitive plants in the area? So there's kind of too many factors to just kind of give a blanket answer, and you really have to kind of go out and look on the landscape.
And then some of the stuff on the ground, if it doesn't have a lot of opportunity to get air folded in, you can end up with a lot of smoke too. And
Right.
that may adversely impact your smoke management plan.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So yeah, it depends. Emily from Mendocino County was wondering what some of the best practices and procedures are for post-burn monitoring for smaller organizations like PBAs or even individual landowners.
It kind of depends on what you want to be monitoring. So I would say for smaller organizations, people with not very many resources, photo points. Photo points are by far the best. They tell a story, and they're easy to replicate, and you can get volunteers to replicate it. You can kind of, I think the best monitoring is monitoring that you do. And if it gets too complicated, you don't do it. And so if you can monitor, and I think photo points are really just the simplest. Fuels transects, if you're really interested in how you've reduced fuels, you can do like herbaceous surveys. You can do surveys looking at the tree canopy. Tree mortality is maybe something else to pay attention to, is like a simple thing is like, okay, what trees died, what trees lived. Unless you want to get a more robust monitoring plan that's kind of more intensive. I think those are really kind of some of the easier.
In terms of grabbing photo points too, I think it can be as complex as using an Esri map, survey tool, or it can be as simple as just, putting up a little A-frame with a card on it that says what you're looking at and snapping a photo of it with your phone and then go back, later on, put the A-frame back up there, change the date. This is it at this date and time kind of a thing. So it doesn't have to be terribly complicated, I don't think.
There is some really cool stuff you can do with like Esri story
Oh,
maps.
yeah, there is, but
That's above my pay grade.
yeah, I'm just scratching the surface of that animal. Melanie from Fire Safe Sonoma is also curious to know, how does one's approach to restoration using fire as a tool vary based on ecosystem, season, and fauna that use those areas for habitat and food? Somebody else had mentioned that too, I think.
So is that it sounded like more of a comment than a question, I guess.
Well, she was curious to know,
Like how we're thinking about it.
yeah, so I mean, in one ecosystem, would you, maybe do a more aggressive, intensive prescribed or broadcast burn, and maybe another area it's more sensitive, maybe only do pile burns,
Yeah,
so
and
you
probably
don't
most of the
try
area
to.
I'm comfortable doing broadcast burn. I think timing is going to make a big difference. So, if I'm really trying to get my fuels reduction done, I'm probably looking at an October burn with like rain coming, but no rain yet. If I'm looking at a more sensitive area, maybe I'm looking after a couple rains and we get a little bit of a drying period. Maybe we're just pile burning if have some really sensitive plants and we can like really pull all the heat away from those species that we're really concerned with, especially if they're in low populations. And then like sometimes I'm trying to get rid of plants, invasive plants. We burn a lot for invasive plants. So then I'm timing at spring, right before they're able to set seed. And so it kind of, before you can start using fire, I think you need to understand the ecology a little bit. And on that, like really our Native Advisory Council at Pepperwood has really helped guide my understanding of the use of fire, in terms of thinking about like what are priorities in terms of the WAPO people and kind of what they were looking at. Really, I think is important context, because understanding how people have originally used fire on the landscape, I think is really going to help guide the future of fire on our landscape. There's so many other factors now. I think invasive plants and fuel loading are really, really big ones that's really where a lot of my focus with fire is like reducing invasive plants, reducing fuel loading, so that we can start to think about fire like maybe in a more historical way that it has kind of been used. And I know that Fire Forward also is like dealing with the plethora. Like I'll get questions from some people of like, well, how do you burn redwoods? And I like, honestly, I'm like, I don't burn in redwoods. We don't really have redwoods on Pepperwood. We have a few small stands. I'll point somebody in the direction. And I think it's really important to be super humble and honest about it and be like, it's important to know what you don't know.
Exactly. It's like, I was just reminding myself of, you know, how you can look at a circus, somebody up on a high wire, walking that wire, and they make it look so easy. But if you actually get up there and try to do it and learn from what they have to tell you, you'll learn that it very rarely are things as easy as they appear. You know, from doing prescribed burning to building a car engine to, you know, properly walking your dog, you know. Yeah, things oftentimes are a lot more complicated than, you know, the casual observation would, you know.
And I think it proves to the point why we need community, right? Like
Yes.
I can be a really strong, like I understand like oak woodlands and burning in oak woodlands really well, but there's so many of these other community members that maybe have these different aspects and can bring these different pieces of knowledge to that so that we can all come together. I've burned in redwoods, but I've never been the lead on redwood burn. So it's like cool, I can pick up those little pieces of information, but then also know those characters. So when I get asked those questions, is like point them, be like, hey, go talk to so and so.
Crowdsourcing is key, right? Yeah.
True, and I think we've shifted away from this notion of needing to be an expert because there's so many things to know and it's changing, it's shifting, it's evolving. So, acknowledging what we don't know and trying to stay away from generalizations. We don't have canned prescriptions for a reason because it
Right.
depends on the ecosystem, it depends on so many different variables. Um, I dropped a resource in the chat that is intended to just give the briefest overview on the Goldilocks prescription that tells you in general when different ecosystems and times of year and the conditions that we're looking at. But this is not a magic formula. It's not a silver bullet. This is a tool that we are all learning to learn so many different nuances on, and we need our friends who are doing this work in so many different areas and trading that knowledge and learning to adapt as we go.
Wow. That's a perfect segue to this next question. So Marika from our team, she was asking, are there opportunities for the public to sign up and observe a prescribed burn and learn more about it? So maybe we should connect with you guys and you could give us like a, you know, one pager of what they might need to wear to bring, things like that, and connect, you know, some folks up who may want to experience that. I know I would.
The
Because
best
I
way-
understand as a firefighter, I learned to put fire on the ground as a firefighter. But talking to other firefighters and you guys who do the prescribed burning, it's a whole different thing. It's a whole different thing.
It is. Yeah, and the best place to get that information is really the GFA listserv because when we have burns that come up, that's where we share that they're happening and some of them are appropriate for observers, some of them are not. Oftentimes we can't plan these very far out in advance because there's so many variables that are shifting. So if you really are interested in coming out and joining, then that is the best place to learn. And then we do a little bit of matchmaking for what's the best way, where can we actually host people in a safe and responsible way so that it's a positive and constructive experience for everyone involved.
Yeah.
And you,
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
oh,
Devyn.
I was just going to say, you can join the listserv on that link from the PBA website, and you don't have to be fireline trained or anything to join the general listserv. So it's open to everybody.
Oh, perfect. Great. All right. I got something to do now.
Mhm.
All right, we're almost out of time. I'm trying to keep us but to close before 3:15 because we started our live stream about 15 minutes late. So that'll package us up nicely for a 1 hour program. But before we close out, I did want to mention, Lynn put this in the chat, but I wanted to call attention to it. Lynn Garrick from Upper Mark West, they're hosting a Burn Pal workshop with Devyn on Sunday, March 23rd. 9 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the Upper Mark West watershed. If you want hands-on experience building burn piles as well as more information from Devyn, send Link an email and she'll send you the registration link. And one of our folks will hopefully put the Lynn's email contact in the chat. Lynn did drop it in there earlier. Actually, I can do it real quick. Copy.
Thanks, Lynn.
And yeah, so thank you guys for doing this. Great presentation, a really good audience. Yeah, we don't often enough have enough people to where I could do the door prize giveaway. So that's great. And again, remind folks, if you get an email from me saying, hey, I need your home address or your mailing address so I can send you our door prize from Fire Safe Sonoma. It's not a scam. It's me trying to get your address to mail you that door prize. So thanks, team Fire Safe Sonoma, the 4 fellows, Julie, Malia, Alina, and Aiden. And thanks to our staff at Fire Safe Sonoma, Erika, Emily, and Becca. And super, super thanks to you guys, Erika and Devyn, for doing the presentation today. Phenomenal. I can't wait to see how many views we get on this thing on YouTube. This is great.
Thank you so much for hosting.
Yeah,
Totally. Yeah.
love being here.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Oh, I almost forgot. I'm supposed to mention our next presentation. We got a lot of speakers lined up this year. In March, we'll hear from Ariel. I'm not going to do her last name, from Blue Forest Project Development. She's a Blue Forest project development consultant who will share how healthy watersheds and accompanying wildfire risk decrease in resilience can create value for both beneficiaries to support projects, and how financing can play a role in supporting watershed and ecosystem restoration. Click the link in the chat to register for this speaker series, Fire Safe Sonoma speaker series. Again, thanks so much, everyone, and we'll see you next month. Bye-bye.